Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Founders Grid, sponsored by Gaper.io. Today we have Karen. Karen is the SVP at OrderGroove, and she's also a career coach. Karen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here.
So, give us a brief background about yourself prior to what you've been doing prior to OrderGroove, and then we'll discuss what you're doing at OrderGroove.
Yeah, of course. So 20 years ago, I actually started my career as a stage manager. I thought I was going to do the theater life. I worked out in LA for a while, and I quickly realized that that lifestyle was not right for me. Loved the work, but when it actually had to be my livelihood, it just wasn't going to be a match. So I made the career move to go into HR, and I absolutely love it. I really believe that my purpose is to help people find success within the work that they do, because we all work way too much. So how can we make sure you're in a role that you're really enjoying? And then helping companies build really amazing cultures and environments where those people can thrive, and how those two things come together. I worked for a variety of different companies, but about 15 years ago, I really found my love for tech startups, and worked for an aerospace company, then worked for a company called Yodel, which I got to see grow and actually get acquired by web.com, which was a great, experience to go through, especially as an HR person. We acquired companies and then were acquired. So I got to see both sides. And now I've been at OrderGroove for about 4.5 years.
Wow, amazing. And how's the journey been so far at OrderGroove?
It is so exciting. I still feel guilty saying this, but we are one of the few industries that has done well in COVID, because we work with e-commerce companies. So how can we help retailers and brands build recurring revenue programs so that I get my paper towels on a recurring basis, I get my dog food, I get my diapers. And especially during COVID, that's been something that people have really been leaning on. So we've been very, very fortunate on that side. And we have a lot of smart people trying to figure out new problems every day.
Got it. Got it. So, being a senior people's person, right? So, keeping the conversation much more relevant to COVID. So, mental health is something which has been under discussion for the past few months. So, because yes, initially we were like, April or May, everyone was like, okay, work from home is good. It's going to stay here for and stay. But in June, July, we started hearing things about burnouts and mental health and everything. So can you walk us through the journey at OrderGroove from March till we're in November now? So how the journey has been for you?
Yeah, I think to your point, those first couple of months, it was such an adrenaline rush of, we just have to figure this out, keep everybody safe. You've got kids at home, you've got 5 roommates, or you're in a studio by yourself, which is, 300 square feet or whatever small New York apartments are. How do we help you get through this? And I think those were the first couple of months, and everybody was just so proactive in doing that. And then the acute stress of a pandemic, of racial injustice, of nasty politics, really started taking a toll on people, because it wasn't ending. It was just continuing to pile on over the summer. And so that adrenaline rush completely hit a wall, and yet the level of stress didn't go away. And so we saw a lot of burnout. So we actually did a couple of days where the company closed for extra days. So you usually do July 4th. We did an extra day there. We did a random day in August, just to help people disconnect. Because I think one of the biggest causes of burnout is that, besides the external factors and stresses, people don't know how to stop their day. And so we wanted to really encourage them to get offline. And so we actually closed the company for extra, quote unquote, holidays over the summer for that.
Oh, wow, interesting thoughts. Interesting on that. So, which brings me, so like you mentioned, you've been into the e-commerce space and helping companies transition through that. So e-commerce and remote teams. So is it an old concept to them, or they were kind of like adaptive towards it? And how do you think remote work is here to stay, or it's going to kind of like be phasing out and stuff?
It's interesting, even as sort of a cool tech startup company, we were very office focused. We had some remote folks because they were salespeople or whatever, but almost everybody was based in New York, and we really saw FaceTime as important. we quickly realized that if we can do this during the worst of times, we can absolutely do it in the best of times. And so while we will always have an office in New York and a couple of other places if needed, where we have sort of hubs, we have absolutely moved to a flexible work from anywhere program. So if going into the office is important to you when it's safe in your city, we can support that. But if you want to stay remote, if you want to move outside of New York and I don't know, move to Iowa or whatever, whatever your life is calling for you at that moment, we're totally okay with that. If you want to do a mix, if I'm probably going to be a person that maybe goes in a couple of days a week, but that's probably about it. So it was actually, even though most of our friends and colleagues in the tech space were probably ahead of us when it comes to this, we have absolutely moved to a flexible work from anywhere policy moving forward.
Got it. Got it. So, which brings me, so the second half of the podcast, I want to focus more on your career coach experience. So, so can you tell us a bit more on that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I had started doing it. I mean, it's always been part of my career because obviously in HR, you help people with their careers. But starting last year, I was more purposeful about doing it outside of my day to day, gaining some certifications, et cetera. And I thought when COVID hit, it was going to shut it down because so many people were getting laid off and they just needed jobs. And the complete opposite happened. They really saw this moment, whether life dictated it for them because they got laid off or, recognizing there's more to us than what we do on a day-to-day job. People really started thinking about what's important to me. If I'm going to spend all this time working, I want to be doing it in a way that brings me joy and helps me feel successful. So I actually saw an uptick in people looking for coaching and helping them figure out what they want to do. I started the podcast, sharing other people's stories of career changes to know that, you're not alone. You can do this. Other people do it. We've started doing some virtual workshops to offer free coaching to folks sort of live in this workshop. And people have found it really helpful. And it's amazing the responses I've been getting.
Nice, nice, nice. So since then I know we're time constrained and we can talk for half an hour at least more, but my marketing team kind of like they just cut the podcast off, so I don't want. So my last question would be, since being an experienced executive, what advice would you give to young startup founders who are just kind of like starting out, especially the ones that started during the COVID and
Yeah.
were kind of like put in this whirlpool of things? So what advice would you give to these young CEOs?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's two things. First of all, identify what's going to be important to your company. It's easy to copy Google or copy whoever, but figure out the values and the employee promise that you want to offer based on your business and your own personal values. And then I think the second piece is just like you rely on, a great product leader, a great finance person to make sure everything is taken care of on the books. Don't hold back and think that you shouldn't have an HR person early on. It can be a contractor, it can be a part-time person, it can be an advisor, but have someone help you build a great team from the beginning, because those are the people that are going to get your business either off the ground or not. And so find an expert partner that you can work with, even if you're still early in your journey.
God, Karen, thank you so much for being on the show. Take care of yourself. It was really lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.